in one of those coves along the eastern shore of the Hudson River, at the broad expanse of the river named by an ancient Dutch navigator, there lies a small rural port known by the name of Tarrytown. This name was given, we're told, by the housewives of the nearby county, who are the habit of their husbands to linger about the village tavern on market days. Well, not far from the village, about 2 miles away, is a little valley, which is one of the quietest places on earth, and a small brook glides through it with just murmur enough to lull one to sleep, and the whistle, the quail, or the tap of the woodpecker are almost the only sounds that ever break it in upon this uniform tranquility. There is no retreat from the world and its distractions more promising than this little valley. From the stillness of the place and the character of its inhabitants, who are descendants from the original Dutch settlers, this secluded glen has long been known by the name of Sleepy Hollow. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to fill the very atmosphere. Some say that the place was bewitched during the early days of the settlement. Others say that an old Indian chief, the wizard of his tribe, held his powwows there before the country was discovered by Henry Hudson. The place still continues under the sway of some witching power that holds a spell over the minds of the people. They are given all kinds of marvelous beliefs, and are subject to trances and visions, frequently see strange sights and hear music and voices. The place abounds with local tales and haunted spots, twilight, superstitions, and nightmares. The dominant spirit that haunts this enchanted region is a headless figure on horseback. It is said by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in the battle of the hill during the Revolutionary War. And it has been seen ever since by the country folk, hurrying along in the gloom of night as if on wings of the wind. His haunts are not confined to the valley. Oh no, not in the least. But extend at times to the adjacent roads and especially to the vicinity of a local church. Indeed, some local historians claim that the body of the trooper was buried in the churchyard, and the ghost rides to the scene of the battle every night in a quest for his head. The rushing speed with which he sometimes passes along in the hollow midnight blast is owing to his being late and in a hurry to get back to the churchyard before daybreak. The legendary superstition has furnished material for many a wild story in this region of shadows, and the specter known by all the country firesides by the name of the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. Everyone who resides there for a time is sure to inhale the witching influence of the air and begin to dream and to see spirits. In this place there lived a worthy fellow from Connecticut by the name of Ichabod Crane, who settled there, or tarried, as he expressed it, in Sleepy Hollow for the purpose of instructing the children of this vicinity. The name of Crane was well suited to him. He was tall and very lank, with narrow shoulders and long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves. Oh, the feet, they might as well have served as shovels. His whole frame hung together most loosely. His head was small and flat at the top, with huge ears and large green eyes, and a nose so long that it looked like a weathercock perched on its head to tell which way the wind blew. To see him striding along on a windy day, with his clothes fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for a scarecrow that escaped from a cornfield. Well, his schoolhouse was a low building of one large room, rudely constructed of logs. The windows partly patched with pages of the old copy of books that were no longer read. The schoolhouse stood in a rather lonely but pleasant spot, just at the foot of a woody hill, with a brook running close by, and a large birch tree growing at one end. And from there the low murmur of his pupils' voices reciting their lessons might be heard on a drowsy summer's day, like the hum of a beehive, interrupted now and then by an authoritative voice of the master, or by the appalling sound of the birch as he urged one of his students along the path of knowledge. He was a conscientious man who believed in the principle of spare the rod and spoil the child. Ichabod Crane's scholars certainly were not spoiled. He administered justice with good judgment rather than with severity, taking the burden off of the backs of the weak and laying it on those of the strong. A puny lad who winced at the least flourish of the rod was passed by with indulgence, but justice was satisfied by inflicting a double portion on some tough, wrong-headed urchin who grew stubborn and sullen beneath the birch. All this he called doing his duty by their parents. And he followed it by the assurance that the smarting urchin would remember it and thank him for it the longest day that he had to live. And then, when the school hours were over, he was the companion and playmate of the larger boys. On holiday afternoons, why, he would walk some of the smaller ones home. The smaller children who happened to have pretty sisters or good housewives for mothers, noted for their good cooking. Indeed, it behooved him to keep on good terms with his pupils. The income from his school was very small, and would have been scarcely sufficient enough to furnish him with daily bread. For he was a huge feeder. According to country wisdom, he stayed at the houses of the farmers whose children he instructed. With these he lived a week at a time, thus going the rounds of the neighborhood, with all his worldly effects tied up in a cotton handkerchief. Still, all this might not be too much for the purses of rustic patrons, who are apt to consider the costs of schooling a severe burden, and schoolmasters as lazy. Well, he made himself both useful and agreeable. He assisted the farmers occasionally in the lighter labors of their farms. He helped them make hay and mended fences and took the horses to water and drove the cows from the pasture and cut wood. He helped mothers by sitting with the children on one knee while rocking a cradle with his foot for hours. In addition to his other work, he was the singing master, and he picked up many bright shillings by instructing the young folks in singing psalms. It was a matter of no little vanity to him, on Sunday, to take his station in front of the church with a band of chosen singers. His voice sounded far above the rest of the congregation, and there are peculiar sounds still to be heard in the church that are said to be descended from the nose of Ichabod Crane. Thus, by hook or by crook, the worthy scholar got along well enough, and was thought by those who understood nothing of the demands of teaching to have a wonderfully easy life of it. The schoolmaster is generally a man of some importance in the female circle, especially in a rural neighborhood, being considered a gentleman of vast superior taste and accomplishments to rough country men, and indeed inferior in learning only to the parson. His appearance, therefore, is likely to cause a little stir at the tea table of a farmhouse, and the addition of a special dish of cakes or candies or a parade of silver teapot, well, Ichabod was so happy in the smiles of all the country damsels. He moved along the churchyard, between services on Sundays, gathering grapes from them, from the wild vines that overran the surrounding trees, reciting for their amusements all the epitaphs on the tombstones, or sauntering with a group of them along the banks of the Hudson, well, or Mill Pond, whatever was closer at that moment. While most bashful fellows, they hung sheepishly back, envying his superior elegance and ways of talking. In his wandering life, he carried local gossip from house to house, so that his appearance was always greeted with satisfaction. He was also admired by the women as a man of great learning, for he had read several books all the way through, and was a perfect master of Cotton Mather's History of New England's Witchcraft, in which, by the way, he most firmly believed. His appetite for ghosts and spirits was extraordinary, and had been increased by his residence in the spellbound region. No tale was too monstrous for him. It was often his delight, after school was dismissed, to stretch himself out on the rich bed of clover bordering the little brook by the schoolhouse, and there read dreadful tales until the gathering dusk of evening made the printed page a mist before his eyes. Then, as he wended his way by the swamp and stream and woodland to the farmhouse where he happened to be staying, every sound fluttered his excited imagination. The moan, the whippoorwill, the cry of the toad, the dreary hooting of the screech owl, the sudden rustling of birds in a thicket, frightened from their roost, the fireflies too, which sparkled most vividly in the darkest places now and then, while they startled him. If by chance a huge beetle came blundering in flight against him, he was ready to give up the ghost, with the idea that he was struck with a witch's token. His only resource on these occasions, either to drown thought or drive away evil spirits, was to sing psalm tunes. The good people of Sleepy Hollow, as they sat by their doors in the evening, were often filled with awe at hearing his nasal melody floating from a distant hill along the dusky road. And that is Part 1, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Join us for Part 2, which will follow very soon.